The land stretched wide beneath a sun that never hurried, golden grass bending in the noon wind, skies so pale blue it almost looked washed clean by God himself. Julian rode across that plain with the heaviness of a man who had long since forgotten the warmth of laughter. At 33, the cowboy wore solitude like others wore dust. It clung to him, settled into his bones, and could not be shaken off. His ranch stood lonely at the edge of prairie and scrub, fences leaning tiredly, porch planks creaking with every gust of wind. Neighbors whispered of him in town, not with kindness, but with that cruel fascination reserved for men who did not fit neatly into the fold. Julian can't keep no woman. Cursed with solitude, that one. He pretended not to hear, but their words burned all the same. A quiet shame locked deep behind his dark eyes. On that day, his life turned without warning, though at the time it felt as ordinary as the shifting of cattle. A wagon creaked into sight, worn wheels carrying a woman whose eyes looked both weary and unbroken. She was 29, Diana, though he did not yet know her name. She stepped down from the wagon with movements both practical and careful, as if she had learned to hold herself against too much disappointment. Dust swirled about her hem, the sun finding copper glints in her brown hair, though her face bore the shadows of someone too long judged. Town had been unkind to her too. Rumors clinging, gossip thrown like stones. Poverty, whispers of a failed arrangement, the things people said when they needed someone to scorn more than themselves. Julian stood at the fence, arms crossed, hat shadowing his eyes. He said little, as always. She met his gaze without flinching. "I hear you're needing someone to cook," she said, her voice steady, though not without a note of vulnerability, as if bracing herself for dismissal. He hesitated only a moment before replying, "I don't need chatter. Just meals on the table." She nodded, almost relieved by the plainness of his words. "Then that's what I'll give you." And just like that, she crossed the threshold of his home, though neither knew then how deeply she would change it. The first meal she prepared was simple: beans, cornbread, coffee strong enough to burn the throat. Julian sat across from her, the scrape of cutlery on tin plates louder than any conversation. He watched her hands, steady, capable, yet carrying a kind of grace he hadn't realized he missed. She did not ask about his life, nor did he ask about hers. But when he rose from the table, he muttered, almost against his will, "Best cornbread I've had in years." A flicker of a smile tugged at her lips, small but real. That smile settled into his memory like sunlight spilling through a half-open door. Days unfolded with silence as their companion. Julian mended fences, rode out to check cattle, returned dusty and sunbaked. Diana kept to the kitchen, the garden, the washing line, her presence filling spaces once hollow. And yet, though she worked near him, a wall of restraint stood between them. He would glance at her when she bent to lift water buckets, but look away before his eyes lingered too long. She would watch him from the porch as he saddled his horse, but turn when he caught her. Their lives moved parallel, never quite touching, though both carried the quiet ache of wanting more. The town, however, did not let them be. Word spread fast in saloons and stores. Another woman working at Julian's place. One man sneered over whiskey. "Won't last long." None ever do. Laughter followed, harsh and mocking. Some whispered worse, that Diana must be giving him more than meals. She overheard once, her cheeks flushing hot with humiliation. Alone in the dark of her small room at the ranch, she considered leaving. Pride clawed at her. She had run from gossip before. She could do it again. But when she quietly packed her few belongings, Julian, who rarely stepped into others' matters, stopped her. "If you go," he said gruffly, voice raw, "the silence here might finish me." It was more confession than he had ever intended. She froze, hands trembling on the latch of her trunk. Slowly, she set it back down. And though neither spoke further, something shifted. Small gestures carried more weight than grand declarations. One evening she found the broken handle on her trunk mended, the work done without a word from him. Another morning, he discovered a steaming cup of coffee left on his workbench before dawn. They gave, they received, without naming the gifts. Connection grew not in bursts, but in quiet, steady breaths. Still, the gossip did not stop. Julian endured it in silence, shame gnawing. Diana carried it too, her dignity bruised each time someone smirked in her direction at market. But instead of breaking them apart, the weight began pressing them together, as if hardship itself was the hand that nudged them closer. The turning point arrived not with gentle words, but with a storm. Summer heat had cracked the earth, and when rain finally came, it did so with fury. The sky roared black, wind tearing through the plains, rain lashing sideways. Julian rushed to secure the animals, Diana at his side before he could tell her otherwise. Lightning split the sky, horses panicked, fences buckled under the strain. Together they fought through mud and wind, her skirts heavy with water, his shirt plastered to his skin. When she slipped in the muck, his hand caught hers with a strength that steadied her heart more than her footing. In that storm, barriers broke. They shouted orders above the thunder, eyes meeting in brief, searing moments of trust. By the time the sky calmed, they were drenched, exhausted, and standing side by side beneath the leaking roof, breath mingling in the charged silence. He looked at her, then not as a cook, not as a hired hand, but as the missing part of himself he had long denied. "Thank you," he said, simple but heavy, the words carrying more than gratitude. She held his gaze, lips trembling with an unspoken reply. After that night, something softer lived between them. He found himself lingering on the porch where she worked at mending clothes, pretending to whittle just to be near. She began humming low tunes while cooking, and he listened with a hunger he did not name. Their conversations grew, hesitant but true, snippets of childhood, memories of losses, confessions of fears. He told her once, voice rough, "I was made to think I'd always be alone." She answered gently, "So was I." The day he confessed came with no storm, no chaos, only a sky wide and clear, a breeze rustling the tall grass. Diana sat on the porch, darning socks, sunlight gilding her hair. Julian stood for a long moment, torn between silence and the truth that pressed harder each day. At last, he walked to her, every step a battle with old ghosts. "I hired you for meals," he began, voice thick. She looked up, startled by the tremor in his tone. "But you've been feeding something I thought dead in me." She set the needle down, heart pounding. "And what is that?" "Hope," he whispered, eyes burning. "Hope that I ain't meant to be a ghost out here. Hope that someone might look at me and not see a failure, not see a man unfit for love." Her breath caught, tears blurring her vision. "Julian, I don't want you just cooking in my house," he said, words spilling now like a dam broken. He knelt clumsily, pulling from his pocket a simple silver band, worn smooth with time. "This belonged to my mother. I want it to belong to you. Not because I'm lonely, but because with you, I'm alive again. Will you marry me?" For a moment the world went silent, but for the rush of her heartbeat. Tears slipped down Diana's cheeks, but her smile was radiant, unshaken. She reached for him, hands trembling as she whispered, "Yes, Julian. Yes." He slid the ring onto her finger, and in that instant, the ranch no longer felt hollow. Two souls who had been told by the world they were unworthy stood bound by choice, not circumstance. Their kiss was gentle, hesitant at first, then certain, carrying the weight of all the words they had never dared speak before. News of their engagement spread fast. Town that had once mocked fell quiet in disbelief. Some scoffed, others begrudgingly tipped hats in respect. Julian and Diana walked through the street together, shoulders straight, eyes forward, hand in hand. For the first time, neither flinched from the world's gaze. Back at the ranch, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in fire and rose, they stood on the porch together. The boards still creaked, the fences still leaned, but everything looked different. Home was no longer silent. It was alive with laughter waiting to be born, with dreams daring to be spoken. And if an old soul were to tell it, they would say this: love does not always come with trumpets or lightning. Sometimes it arrives like a quiet meal shared, a hand steadied in a storm, a ring slipped onto a finger beneath the wide prairie sky. Loneliness can carve a man hollow, shame can chain a woman's spirit, but small mercies, mended trunks, cups of coffee left without a word, can build a bridge strong enough to carry two weary hearts. So if ever you find yourself swallowed by silence, believing you are too broken, too judged, too late for love, remember Julian and Diana. Remember how hope can be fed by something as simple as cornbread, how dignity can be reclaimed not by grand defiance, but by standing hand in hand against the cruel winds of gossip. Love, when it finally comes, asks only that you dare to stay. And in that staying, a life, once lonely, becomes forever full. Before you ride off, tell me where in the wide world you're watching from.